Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. My name is Janine Donnelly. I am the Manager of Webinars for IBM Systems Magazine, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Today's webinar, Virtel Web Access Simplified Terminal Emulation, is sponsored by Software Diversified Services. Today, we'll discuss better ways to leverage your mainframe to deliver the most modern, secure, and easily supportable terminal emulation for your users and save money at the same time. With that, Yvonne, I will turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Janine, and hello everyone. My name is Yvonne Wheaton and I represent Software Diversified Services. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on the SysperTec Virtel Web Access browser-based 3270 terminal emulation product. Simplify terminal emulation, save up to 80%. If you have any questions during our presentation today, please send them to us in your question box. We will be doing a Q&A session at the end. You can also reach us by email after this webinar at info@stsusa.com. Here's our agenda for the next 50 minutes or so. I'll be introducing SDS, or Software Diversified Services, and discussing the 3270 terminal emulation marketplace. I've been in IT business for over 30 years, both in mainframe system shops and enterprise vendor environments. Colin Vanderross from SDS will be introducing you to the SysperTec Virtel Web Access solution. Colin Vanderross, a senior systems engineer here at SDS, has over 25 years experience. He's been at SDS for several years now, focused on network software solutions and security solutions. John Bakioki from SysperTec will be providing a demo for VWA so you can see the SysperTec product in action. John has been in the mainframe and system software industry since 1977. His main focus is extending legacy applications by providing web access, modernization, and integration solutions that leverage these applications. SDS, or Software Diversified Services, has been providing mainframe solutions to the market for over 33 years. Our headquarters are located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. SDS has strived to bring software solutions to the marketplace that provide both cost savings while still using elegant and state-of-the-art functionality. We're proud of our world-class support. Over the years, we've developed more solutions for the distributed environment, and we've added to our mainframe portfolio, and we've partnered with key subject matter experts for excellent software solutions. We will touch on 3270 terminal emulation history. The mainframe has been around for over 50 years. 3270 terminal emulation has been around for over 30 years. As you all well know, the past 10 to 15 years have been marked by uncertainty when it comes to the mainframe industry. In the late 90s, the buzz was that the mainframe was becoming an obsolescent technology that would be soon replaced by the new current server technology. From the mid-2000s to only a couple of years ago, the economic downturn led management to question the mainframe costs and to implement drastic mainframe budget reductions. The leitmotif was, and actually still is, do more with less. It was definitely not the time to invest in mainframe modernization. 3270 terminal emulation worked just fine as it was. And the only reason to change the 3270 terminal emulation was to reduce the software licensing cost while retaining the same functionality and the same technology. But times have changed. Although client-server solutions have increased since the late 90s, most organizations now understand that their mainframe is here to stay. The economy has rebounded, and mainframe budgets have reopened. Mainframe modernization is a live topic again. Most organizations understand the true value of their mainframe assets and are looking for solutions to extend the relevance of and investment in those mainframe assets. Meanwhile, the client marketplace has changed tremendously in recent years, with mobility, BYOD, desktop virtualization, and the fast-changing web browser technology. The client technology that most 3270 terminal emulators are based upon is now outdated. It is time to reassess your 3270 terminal emulation solution. Let's start by reviewing the technology that traditional 3270 terminal emulators are based upon. Most 3270 terminal emulators rely on client-based architecture. What does that mean? It means that the 3270 emulation program, typically relying on Halapi or Java code, runs on the client device. That program is device dependent. It works on the device that it was designed and developed for, but won't work on other devices. It connects to the mainframe via telnet connection, which is essentially an SNA connection extended over the internet. Data is not encrypted on SNA or telnet connections. Therefore, a VPN is required to encrypt and protect data on telnet connections. The advantages of this architecture are that it works well with traditional PC Windows workstations. Users are familiar and comfortable with the product features. There is nothing to install on the mainframe. The disadvantages of this architecture are that it may not work with new devices, tablets, mobile devices, Apple, etc. You need to support thousands of remote client apps. It is difficult to support those client apps when they run on devices that are owned and supported by the users. In other words, this is not a BYOD-friendly architecture. A VPN is required, and it adds to the licensing and support cost of the 3270 emulation solution. A session manager is required to open concurrent sessions, and it too adds to the licensing and support cost of the 3270 emulation solution. The support of a 3270 emulation solution based on Java applets is challenging and costly. This is because the solution is highly sensitive to Java levels, and that Java levels are constantly changing to keep up with security fixes. It is cumbersome to keep the Java levels of client devices and client applets perfectly synchronized at all times. Finally, the long-term solution of 3270 emulators that rely on Java applets or Halapi is threatened with Microsoft and Oracle trying to drop the support of Halapi and Java plugins. Those 3270 terminal emulators that do not rely on client apps rely instead on middle-tier servers. With a server-based architecture, 3270 emulation program runs on a middle-tier server, and it serves the 3270 screens to thin client web browsers. As with the client-based architecture, the 3270 emulation program is device-dependent and works on the type of device that it was designed and developed for, typically a Windows workstation. It connects to the mainframe via telnet connection, which is essentially an SNA connection extended over the internet. Data is not encrypted on that connection. Therefore, a VPN is required to encrypt and protect the data unless the middle-tier server runs inside the organization's firewall. The advantages of this architecture are that it provides thin client benefits. It works with new client devices, tablets, mobile devices, Apple products, and so on. There is nothing to install or support on remote clients. The solution is BYOD friendly. It works well, and users are familiar and comfortable with the product features. There's nothing to install on the mainframe. This type of solution can support both 3270 and other terminal emulations. For example, 5250 to access an AS400 platform. The main disadvantages of this architecture are that the middle-tier servers are the cause for additional software, hardware, and support costs, added latency, which can lead to slow response times, a potential for bottlenecks, load balancing, and scalability issues, additional complexity and fragility, additional components to troubleshoot when something goes wrong. In addition, if a VPN is used to protect the data exchanged between server and mainframe, it adds to the licensing and support cost of the 3270 emulation solution. If a session manager is required to open concurrent sessions, it too adds to the licensing and support cost of the 3270 emulation solution. Finally, the long-term future of 3270 emulators that rely on Java applets or Halapi is threatened with Microsoft and Oracle trying to drop the support of Halapi and Java plugins. The 3270 emulation market has long been dominated by a few top-tier vendors: Attachmate with Extra, Micro Focus with Rumba, and more recently Rocket with Bluezone. There are too many additional 3270 emulation vendors and products to name here, but they all rely on fairly similar technology. They all rely on client or server-based architecture. They all rely on Halapi or Java applets. The top-tier solutions have their advantages. They are proven products. They work well with traditional PC Windows workstations. Users are familiar and comfortable with their features. They do not require installing anything on the mainframe. Being already installed and used, all there is to do is periodically apply some maintenance and renew the product license. But top-tier solutions also have some disadvantages. They all share the disadvantages of the client-server architecture models we discussed earlier. They all rely on Java or Jalopy applets, which are dated and threatened technologies as discussed earlier. They command high licensing fees. Customers have to pay a premium to use those top-tier solutions. In some instances, they pay more for new desktop features that may not be of interest to straight 3270 emulation users. And top-tier vendors can be difficult to deal with when it comes to usage compliance and the payment of overdue maintenance fees when customers try to get back to a supported product release. Now, the client marketplace has changed tremendously in recent years and is still changing, and that is bound to have a serious impact on the 3270 emulation market. One of the main mainframe market disruptions in recent years has been the accelerated pace at which mobile devices, more specifically tablets, have been replacing traditional PC Windows workstations. Experts predict that tablets will outsell PC workstations and laptops by 2018. This means that a growing number of tablets will be used to access mainframe computers in 3270 emulation mode. Does your 3270 emulator support tablets or other mobile devices? Does it run on Android, iOS, Windows Phone, Fire OS, BlackBerry, and Firefox OS devices? Do you see yourself managing the distribution and support of device-specific 3270 emulation applets for all those devices? What a nightmare. Another major mainframe market disruption in recent years has been the spread of BYOD initiatives, whether orchestrated by management or spontaneous and driven by employees. BYOD stands for Bring Your Own Device. With BYOD, 3270 emulation users use their own personal devices as an addition or replacement to the Windows workstations or laptops typically provided and supported by their employer. Users decide what device and what OS they acquire and use. There is definitely overlap between the mobility and BYOD trend and between the challenges that they pose to traditional 3270 emulators as well. With BYOD, the 3270 emulation client could be a workstation, a laptop, a tablet, or some other mobile device, and it could be running any operating system available on the market, mobile or not. Does your 3270 terminal emulator support BYOD? Does it run on any and all web-enabled devices? Do you see yourself managing the distribution and support of device-specific 3270 emulation applets for all those devices? VDI stands for Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. It is also referred to as Desktop as a Service. With VDI, user desktops are centralized and virtualized on a server, and they can be accessed from any web-enabled device, for example, from an internet cafe or hotel computer while traveling. VDI is a form of hyper-converged infrastructure, a software-centric architecture that integrates computing, storage, networking, and virtualization in a single hardware appliance. The main benefit of VDI are it simplifies the desktop management. Together with BYOD and mobility, VDI promotes employee mobility and flexibility. In fact, 27% of VDI access already comes from mobile devices, and mobile VDI is growing fast. VDI saves costs because a new virtual desktop costs less than a new PC. Approximately $600 for a virtual desktop versus $800 for a new PC. VDI enhances business continuity and disaster recovery capabilities. It increases employee satisfaction and productivity. It reduces end-to-end user downtime. If their hardware device fails, users can access their desktop from any other web-enabled device. So does your 3270 terminal emulator support VDI? Well, if you need to install a 3270 emulation program on your device, by definition, this is no longer a VDI compatible solution. You can't use somebody else's web-enabled device to access your own virtualized device. As you know, Windows comes periodically with new versions of its Windows operating system. 3270 emulation programs that used to work with one version of Windows may or may not work on the next version of Windows. Each time it forces licensing and deploying of new 3270 emulation client apps on hundreds or thousands of client devices. The latest version of Windows is Windows 10, which becomes available in the fall of 2015. Does your current 3270 emulator support Windows 10? Do you need to license, deploy, and support new Windows 10 compatible terminal emulation programs? How many times have you upgraded your 3270 terminal emulation clients in the past? How many times will you have to upgrade them in the future? Aren't you tired of it? A major concern regarding new Windows releases is the continued support of Halapi. Some of you might have noticed that when Microsoft announced Windows 8, it initially dropped support of Halapi. Without Halapi support, the 3270 emulation clients that rely on Halapi will obviously no longer work. Fortunately, Microsoft reversed that decision and extended Halapi support with Windows 8 and now Windows 10. But to use Halapi in Windows 10 and future versions of Windows, Windows has to run in degraded XP mode. In degraded XP mode, new Windows 10 features such as touchscreen are not accessible. This creates a strong incentive for migrating off Halapi and the 3270 emulators that rely on Halapi clients. And as they say, the writing is on the wall. The future of applications relying on Halapi applications is definitely threatened. A similar situation developed recently with Oracle, who announced that they were removing the Java plugin. The internet is still buzzing about it. Oracle is following the path taken by modern web browsers who started recently dropping support for plugins. For example, Google permanently removed NPAPI support from its Chrome version 4.5 and installed extensions that require NPAPI plugins are no longer able to use those plugins. With Windows 10, Microsoft introduced their new default browser, Microsoft Edge, which doesn't support ActiveX controls or Java plugins. Going back to Oracle, whether it will reverse its decision to remove the Java plugin support under user pressure remains to be seen. It seems unlikely. What is certain is that without Java plugin, 3270 emulators that rely on Java applets won't work. As with Halapi, the writing is on the wall, and the future of applets relying on the Java plugin is definitely threatened. Now that we understand the shortfalls of the current 3270 emulation technologies and trends and changes that are transforming the 3270 emulation client marketplace, what are the desirable design features for a new, modern, and future-ready 3270 terminal emulator? Modern and future-ready 3270 terminal emulators should not rely on client apps. Instead, it should be a thin client, browser-based solution. Should not rely on middle-tier servers. Instead, it should have a straight connection between client and host. Should not use telnet connections. Instead, it should use end-to-end HTTPS connections. Should not use Java or Halapi client applets. Instead, it should use universally embraced HTML and JavaScript code that can be rendered by any web browser running on any web-enabled device. Virtel Web Access is a modern 3270 terminal emulator that meets all those requirements. It is one of those products in the Virtel Web Suite which is published by SysperTec Communication and distributed in North America by Software Diversified Services. The Virtel Web Suite includes 3 different configurations of the same host-based protocol converter between mainframe and web technologies. Virtel Web Access is a thin client browser-based 3270 terminal emulator. It serves 3270 application screens to a thin client web browser. Virtel Web Access will be the focus of the next presentation by Colin Vanderos. Virtel Web Modernization creates web user interfaces or GUIs for legacy host applications. It serves their 3270 screens as rich user-friendly web pages that provide a genuine web experience. Virtel Web Integration is a universal web conductor for host applications, typically web or messaging services. I will now hand this presentation over to Colin so that he can show you all about Virtel Web Access. Colin?
Thank you, Yvonne, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for taking time out to view our webinar today. I will be providing you with additional technical content on VWA before I hand it over to John, who is going to be providing you with a demonstration of the product. So the first question is, what is VWA and what does it do? Virtel Web Access is a thin client, browser-based 3270 terminal emulator. Virtel Web Access serves 3270 screens as HTML JavaScript pages with 3270 emulation ergonomics to thin client devices straight off the mainframe without middle-tier servers. It is an attractive modernization alternative for client and server-based 3270 terminal emulators such as AttachMate, Roomba, and Bluezone. The first page that Virtel Web Access presents to users that have been successfully authenticated during the logon process is the Virtel Application Selection menu. You will see more of this during John's demonstration. On this menu, only those applications that the user is authorized to access are listed. Applications that the user is not authorized to access are not listed on his display. In addition to the applications that he is authorized to use, you will notice that applications that are up and available for use are highlighted with the green status indicator on the left-hand side of your screen. In this example, CICS, CICSD, TSO, TSO5 are a few of the applications that are up and available for use. Similarly, applications that are down or unavailable can be identified by the red status indicator, and in this example, application Tran2 is unavailable. The application selection menu, together with the multi-window capability of web browsers, works as a simple session manager. So, with multi-tabs open, you can hop between applications very easily. Some of our customers have simply dropped their session manager, and by doing so, they have eliminated the session manager licensing and support costs, which can be pretty high. This is what a 3270 terminal emulation page served by Virtel to a regular workstation with a physical keyboard looks like. Alternate versions with virtual keyboards are served to tablets and other mobile devices that do not have a physical keyboard. As you can see, the page has a traditional 3270 screen layout, colors, and ergonomics, and Virtel supports Mod 2, Mod 3, Mod 4, and Mod 5 screen configurations right out of the box, and other configurations can be supported with some additional customization. As with any traditional 3270 terminal emulator, users enter the application codes exactly as the 3270 application expects them in screen fields, and also navigate from field to field using the tab key. Screen-to-screen navigation still relies on function keys, so for example, PF3 to return or exit, PF7 to page up, PF8 to page down, and so on. A banner is displayed on the top of the screen with several tools: a virtual keyboard, a copy, cut and paste tool, a tool to print screens and delete screen prints, the cog or the gear tool to change the 3270 emulation setup, a macro tool which allows users to record and play macros, a help button, and also the disconnect button which allows users to disconnect from VWA. So users instantly retrieve the familiar look and feel of the traditional 3270 emulator that they have been using for years and are familiar with. Let's expand the discussion a little bit more and talk about how Virtel Web Access works. Virtel Web Access relies on a thin client browser-based architecture, which means that the 3270 emulation program or client app is replaced by the web browser to which Virtel serves as an HTML JavaScript web page. 3270 application screens, such as those of CICS, IMS, and other 3270 applications, are served by Virtel as an HTML JavaScript web page with 3270 emulation ergonomics. Those pages can be rendered by any web browser running on any web-enabled device. Consequently, Virtel Web Access works instantly with any web client available today. any version of Windows, any Apple product, and any tablet or mobile device. Virtel Web Access will even work instantly with any web-enabled device that will become available in the future, because those devices will always be able to render standard HTML JavaScript web pages like those generated by Virtel. Virtel's unique architecture allows for very simple and instant deployment. There is nothing to install on clients, and users simply point their web browser to an installation-defined URL to reach the logon menu. And finally, Virtel's unique architecture simplifies support because there is nothing to support outside the mainframe. There is no client app and also no middle tier server. The support is 100% host-based. Unlike other GUI and web portal solutions, Virtel Web Access uses neither middle tier servers nor Java nor Jalapa components. It eliminates the typical issues associated with middle tier servers, namely additional hardware, software, and support costs, additional latency which can lead to slow response times, a potential for bottlenecks, load balancing, and scalability issues, additional complexity and fragility, and additional components to troubleshoot when something goes wrong. It eliminates the issues typically associated with Java and Jalapa client applets, namely the ever-changing Java levels that make the support of remote Java clients applets quite challenging, an uncertain future for both Java and Jalapa-based solutions. Microsoft had initially dropped the support of Jalapa with Windows 8. Under pressure from end users, they eventually had to extend the support to Windows 8 and Windows 10, but the support is only available in degraded XP mode, a mode in which new Windows 10 functionalities such as new touchscreen functionalities are not available. Early February, Oracle announced that they were dropping the support of Java plugins. It is a death sentence for Java-based 3270 terminal emulation apps. Whether Oracle 2 eventually extends the support of Java plugins a bit longer remains to be seen. What is for sure though is the writing is on the wall for Java and Jalapa client applets. The only way forward is a thin client browser-based solution that relies on universally accepted JavaScript code. Now let's move along and let's see a step-by-step process how Virtel Web Access lets users connect to their 3270 applications. 3270 applications such as Kex, IMS, TSO, and Natural have a screen-based user interface. Users access those applications through telnet connections that work in synchronous connected mode. Virtel Web Access runs as a separate task on the mainframe, and it behaves like a regular VTAM terminal. But behind the VTAM relay are a protocol converter between host and web connection technologies, an IP server that manages asynchronous and disconnected HTTP connections with web users. To generate a 3270 terminal emulation web page, Virtel inserts the 3270 data coming off VTAM into an HTML JavaScript template, and the web pages can be rendered by any browser running on any device. Let's discuss the performance and efficiency of VWA. Now, with the solution running on the mainframe, the question that immediately comes to mind is how much CPU will it consume, and will that consumption impact the mainframe costs? The answer is that Virtel Web Access consumes just about the same CPU as the TN3270 connectors it replaces. We benchmarked it to be absolutely sure. But how come, you may be thinking? It's because the smarts of the 3270 terminal emulation is in the web page JavaScript HTML code, which runs in the client browser and not on the mainframe. What runs on the mainframe is only the merging of the 3270 data coming off VTAM into a web page template, and also the sending of the complete web page to the user via an HTTP server. When it comes to performance, Virtel typically outperforms traditional 3270 terminal emulators, especially those that use middle tier servers, because it has a very short end-to-end instruction path. This is achieved by running only assembler and C++ code on the host, again no Java, and also the use of no middle tier servers. Please note that multiple instances of Virtel Web Access can coexist on the same system, and that Virtel Web Access doesn't have to run in the same partition as the 3270 application it interfaces with. Instead, Virtel Web Access can run across LPARs on a single system or across systems in a sysplex configuration. The bottom line is that Virtel Web Access is as fast and scalable as the mainframe that it runs on. Now let's discuss Virtel Web Access security features and how secure is Virtel Web Access. Virtel Web modernization relies on end-to-end, so client-to-host HTTP connections. Unlike TN3270 connections, HTTP connections are by nature asynchronous and disconnected, and therefore close between exchanges, which is most of the time. And as we all know, a disconnected connection cannot be attacked. Virtel's HTTP connections can be encrypted, in which case encryption is provided through ATTLS. Exchanges between host and client are uniquely authenticated using a proprietary system of dynamically generated exchange tokens, which prevent man-in-the-middle attacks. With each return from the client to the host, Virtel also controls the IP address, which prevents outsiders from infiltrating the client-host dialogue, and also the message length, which prevents the appending of malware to incoming messages. Virtel connections are compatible with proxy, SSO, VPN, and any other IP security, biometrics, multi-criteria authentication, and so on. Virtel supports terminal and printer control. In fact, with all of those integrated IP security features, Virtel customers oftentimes simply drop their VPN. Virtel Web Modernization provides integrated logon authentication. Because Virtel runs on the host behind the host firewall, its code is protected from internet hackers. Note that Virtel breaks and redirects the connection from client to host, so in other words from HTTP to SNA, which makes it quite challenging for internet hackers to reach the host application. Finally, note that Virtel clears the browser's cache at the end of a session, so with dataless clients, no host data is ever exposed in case a client is lost or stolen, which is a real issue with mobile devices. How do customers use Virtel Web Access? Let's review a few case studies. Starting with a European motor car manufacturer. In 2003, this car manufacturer decided to replace the costly global SNA network used to access their IMS applications with simpler and less expensive internet connections, still while retaining the 3270 screen interface to avoid having to retrain the application users. With 400,000 end users accessing this motor manufacturer's applications 24/7 in 150 countries through locally owned and supported workstations, a 3270 terminal emulation solution relying on a client-hosted 3270 emulation programs or on a middle-tier server was simply out of the question. Instead, the customer was looking for a pure, thin client solution, one that didn't require supporting any client app or middle-tier server, and one that could manage and support centrally on the mainframe hosting the IMS applications. Although the term BYOD, or bring your own device, had not been coined yet in 2003, what this modem manufacturer needed was a global BYOD solution. Among the company's main concerns was response time and scalability. When they benchmarked Virtel Web Access, they found it could deliver sub-second response times with up to 16,000 users per Virtel product instance. Together with the possibility to run multiple Virtel product instances in parallel, it guaranteed that VWA could scale up as the company would deploy VWA worldwide to their 400,000 IMS application users. Since its deployment in 2003, Virtel Web Access has been supporting an average of over 3,000 concurrent sessions, with peaks of up to 10,000 concurrent sessions. At this particular modem manufacturer, Virtel also supported a couple of localization services. So it used to automatically select at logon time the language that the IMS application will serve to the user. It also automatically converted back and forth the double byte characters of terminals used in China, Japan, Russia, and other countries that used the DBCS terminals to the single byte European character set used in the IMS database. So the main takeaways from this customer story is Virtel has the strength, capacity, and performance required to support very large deployments. Virtel has 12 plus year successful track record with the support of BYOD initiatives, the superior performance of the product, and lastly, Virtel comes with integrated Unicode and DBCS code. Now on to a BYOD case study with an insurance company. To access the insurance company's products, independent insurance agents had to lease a dedicated Windows workstation. They didn't like having to pay a lease fee for a dedicated workstation that could only be used to access CICS applications and that occupied precious space on their desktops. This being in Europe, many agents use Mac devices for their own business needs, but the company's 3270 terminal emulator didn't support anything other than Windows workstations. For the customer, locking the workstations to prevent the installation of new products was the only way to secure the access to the CICS applications and also to guarantee the integrity of the workstations that they had to support remotely. Switching to Virtel Web Access allowed the agents to use their own workstations or mobile devices to access the company's assurance products. It eliminated the dedicated workstations and also the associated fees, and also freed up some desktop space. It allowed the agents to use Mac and mobile devices instead of Windows workstations. For the customer switching to Virtel Web Access, it eliminated the need to support remote workstations. It allowed them to eliminate the VPN and its cost and also the support requirements. It improved the relationship of the insurance company with its agent and made it easier to attract new agents. This was yet another typical BYOD initiative made possible by Virtel Web Access. The main takeaways from this customer story is Virtel supports any client device. It is perfect for BYOD. With Virtel, there is nothing to support outside of the mainframe. And in this particular case, the customer could actually reduce cost and get rid of its VPN software. Finally, on to a Pennsylvania-based insurance company that specializes in workers' comp, property, and casualty insurance. In 2012, this insurance company had to face the long overdue modernization of its 3270 terminal emulation. Unlike other organizations that rely on web portals or graphical user interfaces to drive CICS transactions, this company still relied on 3270 screen interfaces. All day long, the employees drove every single business transaction through legacy 3270 screens, It made 3270 terminal emulation a very crucial link in their business process. For years, the company had been relying upon one of their top-tier 3270 terminal emulators, which users were very happy with. But the support and maintenance of that product had been dropped a few years earlier, and the old client apps didn't work with the latest version of Windows or with non-Windows clients. Faced with the need to upgrade their workstations and also to comply with a strict directive from their risk management auditors, they contacted the vendor of the 3270 emulation product to reactivate support and also to upgrade the client apps. They were shocked by the price asked by the vendor, a price that, as we understand, included a stiff penalty for having dropped support a few years earlier. They were also reluctant to embark in the deployment and support of 1,000 new client apps. They then decided to evaluate Virtel's thin client browser-based 3270 terminal emulation. One of the challenges of the evaluation was to support up to 6 concurrent sessions per user, and also to manage those sessions in compliance with special naming conventions. Another challenge was to thoroughly verify that the Virtel browser-based solution supported all of the 3270 emulation features that their savvy employers had been using for a long time, and that the ergonomics of the new product didn't get in the way of the employee productivity and satisfaction. Virtel Web Access passed those tests with flying colors. In addition, it saved 80% in software licensing costs alone. It resulted in drastic support reductions because there was nothing to install or support outside of the host, no client app, and no middle tier servers. The deployment was instant. All the users had to do was point their web browsers to the installation defined URL. It also allowed the eliminating of their session manager and VPN and the software licensing cost and support associated with their session manager and VPN. The takeaways from this particular one was reducing of support requirements, saving on software licensing cost, the ease of use. It was transparent to the user, migrating from his old 3270 terminal emulator to VWA, and also no VPN or session manager was required at this customer, which was a huge plus for the customer. Okay, we're on to the last topic from my point of view, and that is doing more with less using VWA. So one of the things from a total cost of ownership point of view is you could lower your licensing fees considerably. You could save up to 80% over top tier 3270 terminal emulators. There's different ways that the product is priced depending on what your requirements is, and that's something that our sales folks can assist you with. That's questions that you may have, and we can certainly field those questions at the end of this webinar. But you can buy it, for example, by seat or enterprise, and you have different models. A subscription, for example, is one of the ways you could acquire the product. From a Windows 10 point of view, there's no new licensing to support new clients. You could lower your support costs. The installation is something that we assist you with. It's a 2-hour installation. We have a meeting up front that we prime you for the installation, but we will certainly assist you to get the product installed and customized to your individual specific requirements. Deploying the product is pretty simple. As you saw, it's a matter of just pointing your URL to the new Virtel Web Access server, and your users are then all set and ready to go. Host-based solution management and control, and it instantly supports any new client. There's an opportunity for some customers to eliminate their VPNs and session manager costs. You saw that in some of the cases I cited earlier. That may not apply to all customers, but there could be potential for you to reduce your licensing and support costs if you did get rid of your VPN and session manager. So thank you everyone for your time. I'm going to hand it over to John to provide you with some additional detail and also provide you with a demo of the product. Thanks everyone, and John, over to you.
My name is John Bakiaki, and I am a Virtel Customer Support Specialist at SysperTec Communication. I'd like to give you a brief tour of Virtel Web Access so that you can see how it works and what it looks like. To start, I'd like to show you the Virtel application menu. You can reach this menu by issuing the URL that you see here. You could have this URL as a link to click on in a web page, but for the purpose of our demo, I am executing it directly from the toolbar. When you execute the request, you will be prompted to sign on using your mainframe user ID and password. And I will do so now. After you input your credentials and sign in, you will then see the application menu. Each line in the menu represents a started task that has been defined to Virtel, or what Virtel refers to in its documentation as an application. These tasks could be CICS, TSO, IMS, your session manager, or any other started task. The green light in front of an application indicates that the task is running and available. The red light indicates the task is not active and is unavailable. Let's click on TSO, which is a TSO instance on our mainframe. And what you are seeing is what Virtel presents to you, a full function 3270 representation in a browser setting. You will be able to utilize all of the function keys, arrows, tabbing, and so on so that you can use in a traditional 3270 browser. The actual name of the terminal that you are signed on with and its associated printer are shown in the lower right-hand corner of the page, along with the row and column number that represents the position of the screen cursor. In addition, a toolbar is provided for specific functions that will be described later on in this demo. Now I will enter my user ID and press enter. This is the standard TSO logon. I will now fill out my credentials again, but you can configure Virtel to pre-fill this page with the credentials that you have previously entered. And we'll show an example of that later on in this demo. We have now signed into TSO, and I'm paging through all the messages that my mainframe puts out at the start of a session. And eventually, we will reach the primary ISPF menu. I now will enter a 2 to go to TSO editing and press enter. Again, this is a standard 3270 screen represented as a web page. As you can see, I can tab through the fields just as if I were using a TN3270 interface. And I will be prevented from typing in protected areas. As you will see, I can get the inhibited indicator on the bottom, which I will have to get rid of by using the reset key. I will now press enter to get a list of my members in this PDS to edit. And I'm going to go down and select $arbload and press enter. And this is a standard edit session. I can page up and down in this document and use any of the standard PF key functions. And I can also use the keyboard on the toolbar to perform the same PF functions, PF8, and then PF7 to page back up again. Also on the toolbar, I can do a copy or cut of text and paste it elsewhere. So I'm going to do this, which is to highlight the 2 lines that I want to copy. I'm going to click on the copy icon, which is here. And then I'm going to set my cursor here, and I'm going to paste. We've just pasted that text onto this document. We can also do a send or receive of data from our PC in the same fashion that you would do in dollar file transfers with a 3270 emulation. We can capture and delete screen images to print out or save as a file. We can record and play back macros. And we can also, by clicking on the Settings button, bring up a list of different things that you can change to affect how your screen looks and how your keys behave. For example, changing the Enter key from the Enter key on your keyboard to the new line key on the keyboard. Now we're going to enter =X on the command line and press Enter to exit TSO. We will now place a 2 here and blank this out and press Enter. And now we will type in log off to exit from TSO. And we have now returned to the Virtel application menu. We'll now show what a standard CICS session will look like with Virtel. Let's click on the CICS link and once again provide our credentials to sign on to the mainframe. In this case, we've pre-configured Virtel to sign into our CICS region using the credentials that we previously entered so that you don't have to enter them twice. We will now type in transaction.u and press Enter. And again, this is a standard 3270 session in a browser that behaves exactly as a TN3270 emulator would. And we can enter the data in the fields and press Enter as directed. And now we can put this application through its paces by pressing Enter to do a search. And we'll type in Red-Headed League, which is an old Sherlock Holmes story, and press Enter. And press Enter one more time to view our first result. And now just to show that the Virtel solution keeps track of where the cursor is, just as the TN3270 emulator would, we're going to place the cursor under the word Ezekiel, and we're going to hit the PF11 key, which just page to the right and put Ezekiel in column 1, which is what the application is designed to do. So again, Virtel Web Access allows you to do everything you can do with a TN3270 emulator without changing your applications. I will now press PF12 followed by PF3 to sign off of our application. And now I will sign out of CICS in the usual manner. And we're back at the Virtel application menu once again. This concludes the demo portion of the Virtel Web Application presentation. I will now turn control over to Yvonne Wheaton so that we can start the Q&A portion of the presentation.
Thank you, John, for the demo on Virtel Web Access. We've really filled up this hour with some good information. We only have time for a handful of questions today, so let's get started. Colin, it looks like this question is for you. The question is, does your product support macros?
Thank you, Yvonne. Yes, and with more flexibility than traditional 3270 terminal emulator products. So macros can be created and reused using dedicated buttons in the banner of the 3270 terminal emulation web pages that is served to the client web browsers. Macros can be stored either on the client device or centrally on the host. Macros stored centrally on the host can be shared by multiple users, and macros are typically used for simple tasks such as walking through screens to reach one specific screen. In addition to macros for complex tasks, Virtel supports scripts which are developed by a systems programmer or other authorized personnel. They are stored on the host where they can be retrieved by authorized users, and virtually limitless in possibility as they can access, process, and aggregate data coming either from the host or from remote servers and serve the response to the client devices in any desired format, including Excel, PDF, and more.
Okay, thank you. I've got this other question here that looks like a really good follow-up question to the first one. And Colin, it's for you again. It's, can you convert macros developed with another product to your product?
Good question, Yvonne. So attachment users can convert their macros automatically and on their own. This macro conversion tool may be extended to other 3270 terminal emulators if the need arises. We, however, recommend against systematically converting the existing macros, and here's why. Similar macros have probably been developed concurrently by several users, and it makes sense to convert the macro once and store it on the host and make it available to all interested users. Some macros, such as automated logon macros, they could pose a threat to security, so anyone who gets the control of the client device can activate that macro to access the host resources. So instead of blindly converting all macros, we recommend taking an inventory of existing macros and then convert only those macros that do pose a security threat and replace similar macros with a shared macro.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Colin. This next question is, how much time does it take to install and deploy your product? And John, I think the installation question would be a perfect question for you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yes, the installation is actually pretty short. It takes less than 1 hour, and it's done by the customer. The only challenge we have with installation of Virtel typically is to make sure that the person that's doing the installation has the authorization to complete some of the installation steps, such as APF authorization or working with VTAM. And what we typically do is we schedule a 20-minute phone call before the installation to review the installation checklist with the systems programmer and to ensure that he or she understands the installation steps and is authorized to complete them or gets an authorized person or persons to participate in the installation. After that, it takes another hour or two to tailor the installation to the customer's specifications. This tailoring is typically done via a webcast during which our support team guides the customer step by step through the tailoring. It accelerates the tailoring while ensuring that everything works to customer satisfaction by the end of the call, and it also works as a training session for the systems programmer. After that, the only thing that's left to do is to send the users the URL that they need to point their web browsers to in order to access Virtel's 3270 terminal emulation service.
Okay, thank you. We have a question about pricing here, and I'll go ahead and take that one. The question is, what is your pricing model? Good question. We have both subscription and purchase licensing models. So that means that prices are based on user counts, but we also have we also offer enterprise licensing with our unlimited user counts. So that might be an option that you're interested in. And I would suggest that you contact Deb Hodson at SDS to find out what would work best for you. Our next question from our audience. Colin, this looks like a good question for you. It is, can I access my session manager with Virtel?
Yes, the short answer is yes. You can tailor the installation so that users access the session manager at logon time. We found, though, that most of the time the session manager was no longer needed because Virtel, being a browser-based solution, all users needed to do was open several sessions concurrently, and they then can use the tab to hop between the different sessions. So most of the time the session manager can simply be dropped.
Okay. We're getting close to the end of the hour here. And Colin, once again, the question is, can you access the same transactions with Virtel and with other 3270 terminal emulation products concurrently?
That's an easy one, Yvonne. So again, yes, Virtel is seen by VTAM as just another 3270 terminal emulator client.
Okay, fantastic. Colin and John, I want to thank you very much for helping with the Q&A today, and that will conclude our Q&A session.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Janine, I think that's all we have time for today, so I will turn it back to you for closing comments. Thank you, Janine.